Lose the plot and lose my cool. I lose my keys but not my conscience. Tell me, do you really want this? Tell me why you won't go? I've tried to let it show. Well, I've been to the bottom and back so many times that I simply lost track. And I think I hit my limit. This time.
You know Ayla Brooke and the Soundman. He's going to be joining us on tomorrow's show, on tomorrow's episode of Real Talk. Very excited about that.
Well, he's been on every show.
But this is actually at the same time going to be his debut on the show. The frontman from Ayla Brooke and the Soundman, they've got there's like a documentary coming out talking about what it's like, or what it has been like, to release an album with high hopes and big ambitions just as a pandemic strikes, like an asteroid, as a pandemic hits planet Earth and changes everything with regards to live music venues and touring, and but maybe people are more captive audiences, and also maybe a talk show launches during a pandemic and starts to use your tracks as their title tracks, and who knows? Anyway, there's a whole bunch of cool stuff to talk about, and we're looking forward to getting into that tomorrow with Ayla Brooke. A good day to you, a good Wednesday. It's the 23rd of February. We're going to be talking about what's going on the border between Russia and Ukraine today. Sarah Hoyles, editorial producer of the show, has lined up a dynamite panel here, two voices, experts on the region out of the University of Toronto, University of Alberta. They're going to be joining me in about 8 minutes or so from now, a little bit later on in the show. Of course, it's Wednesday, so we're going to take you out to Jasper as part of MyJasper Memories, and we're going to meet the first male doula in Western Canada. You're like, what? Yeah, kind of a cool story. Alykhan Sumar went from a business analyst to a doula through the course of this pandemic. I'm going to find out what prompted his journey. And of course, you know that we are among many families right now that are expecting, and we're super excited about that in June. So I'm particularly interested. Sarah puts together some cool questions for me if I can't think of questions on my own, and one of these is awesome. Question number 4. Shouldn't the attention be put on the person literally carrying and delivering the baby? Well, we'll find out. That's coming up in, I don't know, half an hour from now, 40 minutes from now. It's going to be a great episode. I'm checking in a quick scroll through Twitter before we start the show. You always want to make sure you're not missing anything. And there I see Adam O'Brien, the CEO of Bitcoin Well. And he puts it out there. Who in Edmonton doesn't believe in Bitcoin? He says, I'd love to have an open, polite, recorded discussion for public consumption and for entertainment and education. And then he tagged me in it. So I thought, well, I think that's the green light for us to ask everybody out of the gates on today's Real Talk if you might be interested in a conversation like that. We know there's cynics around cryptocurrency. We know that there's people that think it's just a bunch of bros. And then there's people who think that it is a transformative technology, that it is the future. They're taking a look at the fact that El Salvador's GDP went up by 10% over the last year, and they're going, what else does El Salvador have going on? Why else has El Salvador been in the headlines? Some of you will say that it's correlation. Some of you will say it's causation. Anyway, could make for an interesting conversation, maybe even right here on Real Talk. Feel free to reply to him on Twitter at @AdamO'Brien_, or you can hit me up, or you can send us an email anytime. Let's do this.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
So usually we'd save an email like this for a little bit later in the show. I don't always read emails right out of the gates, and especially because when Bradley wrote into us to talk at ryanjesperson.com, he said, my first email to you is a positive reflections, but I don't want to wait until the next positive reflections presented by Kubi Energy to read this. I want to read it right now. The subject line, thanks from a rural doctor. A rural doc. He says, this darn show, literally the only podcast I listen to. Bradley says, it's a show that's born of personal passion. Says, I love the characters on the show, the whole team. It grounds me. I'm a rural Alberta physician, and my empathy has been waning over the last while, and you can probably guess why. lately I've been thinking of so much I could say on Friday's Trash Talk, but listening to this awesome program has really helped me to center myself a bit more. Bradley says, I've realized I've become quite the grump during the pandemic. Maybe rightfully so, but I've been self-reflecting and trying to make a change to be more the self I was before COVID. I've been good at simply letting shit go. I try not to waste my mental energy on things I cannot change, sometimes with the exception of road rage. At least Bradley's honest. At least Bradley's talking real. Says, thankfully, I've turned a new leaf over, maybe rediscovered an old one. I'm trying to be there for my colleagues, for my patients. My wife is a saint for dealing with me and has been a great support. And having the three most beautiful daughters doesn't hurt either. While I still don't agree with the point of view of many anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers still drive me bonkers, I have come to realize I can chill. And while I may disagree, I can empathize with why they may be where they are. My negative energy does not add anything of value. It says, Real Talk grounds me. The open forum for all walks of life lets me feel more in tune with many compassionate, passionate, and open-minded people. You find quality topics and quality guests to talk about them. So take my sincerest thanks. I really thought I was just going to be a source of sarcastic, sardonic, and angry trash talk, and I'm proud to say that my first letter, my first correspondence, could qualify as a positive reflection. Goes on to say, by the way, I'd be open to being a guest on the show. Ooh, okay, Doc. He signs off, Brad, getting a bit less grumpy every week. That is a great email, and I appreciate that email. And a big part of the reason why we get quality subject and quality guests, of course, is because Sarah Hoyles busts her hump every day as the editorial producer of this show, and she's keeping an eye on a lot of the stories that are making news. And Hoyles, we're going to be talking to a couple of experts in just a quick second here about Russia, Ukraine, and what's going on there. I think a bit of background here is probably a good idea as Canada has joined G7 nations and other significant players on the global stage in announcing what I guess is a first round of economic sanctions against Russia, or at least in certain contexts. What are the details we need to know here?
Well, yeah, first things first, they're not all the sanctions that are available like at the disposal of countries such as Canada. They want to leave a little bit in the back pocket just in case things escalate further.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, U.S. has announced financial sanctions. Ukraine's president has called up reservists. So people that are 18 to 60 for a maximum service of 1 year. And in the meantime, Vladimir Putin has gotten approval from the upper house of parliament, a unanimous vote that they can actually use military force outside the country.
Okay, so you imagine you get
after escalation.
You get that call as an 18-year-old in Ukraine right now. That's not the phone call you want to be getting. I've seen some pretty powerful news coverage of families, fleeing on buses, getting the hell out of there, and a lot of these guys that qualify or that fit into that demographic are sticking around. One guy through a translator telling a reporter, I hope this is done in a couple of weeks, but you're going, man, walking a mile in those boots right now. We'll talk to our expert voices on that in just a couple of minutes. Also, of course, a pretty significant amount of our audience, a decent number of our audience, of course, tunes in from Western Canada, in particular Alberta. The throne speech yesterday, Alberta's premier outlining its priorities by way of the United Conservative speech, of course, delivered by Lieutenant Governor Salma Lakhani. The premier taking comments or questions later, speaking to reporters, and had this to say about a budget that's expected to look pretty good with regards to the bottom line. Factors include the high price of oil, but Jason Kenney doesn't want his party to leave any credit on the table, says we're not going to be in a position to potentially balance a budget just because of oil.
There's a lot of speculation that we may be on track for a balanced budget and a surplus this week. If that happens, it will be, yes, in part because of significant growth in non-renewable resource revenues, but it still would not be possible without the spending restraint that we've brought in.
Okay, so wants everybody to know that the government has shown spending restraint, says Alberta's premier. Also went on to say that COVID-19 has highlighted weaknesses in Canada's healthcare system. So, Sarah, when people are going to be combing through this budget on Thursday, including reporters, but average Albertans as well, trying to make sense of it, what does that mean in the context of healthcare? People are going to want to know if Alberta's flush, so to speak, does that relax some pressure on what could prove to be some nasty labor disputes, as an example? I mean, what does this actually mean?
Well, it looks like he says he's going to increase intensive care capacity, hire more nurses, but shift the surgeries to private facilities. So the idea that they'll increase capacity by shifting to more private enterprises.
Okay. And some implications for charter schools as well. The government says it's going to make it easier for people to open charter schools.
Yeah, regulatory changes to create new and support existing charter schools.
Okay, so we'll continue to keep an eye on that, and obviously later this week, budget comes out Thursday. We'll have analysis on Friday, and we'll get to your comments as well. We want to know, where are you at? What are you looking for? What are you expecting? What does this mean in the bigger picture? If you're tuning in from Ontario, how about Ontario's premier yesterday saying that they're not doing the license registration thing anymore, leaving about $1 billion on the table there? I know a lot of people are saying, well, that's kind of an interesting move. So things happening budget-wise, money-wise across the country. A little later on in the show, we'll circle back and take a look on what's going on in some court developments, some court proceedings, some of these organizers of this Ottawa occupation paying the piper now, you might say, and so that's a story that we'll certainly make sure that we follow. Before we get to our leadoff interview this morning, I wanted to remind you that this is a perfect time of year, though your the fingertips may still be freezing as you're walking the dog, and the last thing that you're thinking about maybe is standing out there in your flip-flops and sipping on a cold one while your smoker goes. That salmon just 3 hours away from perfect on your brand new outdoor kitchen setup. But if you want it built by July or by August, and I'm not making the promises, by the way, these are all hypotheticals. If you want it ready for summer, you got to get in touch with the team at Eden Landscaping today. As Adam Sandler might say, today at landscapeedmonton.ca. Mike and his team will design what you're looking for. They tap into, some of you have like these vision boards, or you have a Pinterest board that they can look at, maybe rip pages out of magazines. You go, I want it to look like this. They will bring your outdoor space to life. We guarantee it. You can find them online at landscapeedmonton.ca. Our friends at Grand Dog Essentials want to remind you that they're about so much more than just quality raw food for your dogs. I mean, obviously, it's what we feed our dogs. We've told you that. Moses and Monroe, they get different food, the two of them, customized for, how their guts best operate. But there's supplements, too. You go to the Shop Now link, and you can find a list of supplements, including the ones that we give to our dogs. Monroe needs to chill out a little bit, needs to relax. She has a perfect supplement for that. And then Moses needs the joint and mobility support that comes with the 4-leaf rover, green eggs, joint and mobility support. We see it make a difference. With the older dogs, it can be tougher for them to stand up and get around. Moses benefits from that. Your pup could too. You can learn more at granddog.ca. Don't forget, they deliver to your door in Calgary, Edmonton, and Red Deer, and you'll get 10% off your first-time order at granddog.ca. Well, as mentioned, tensions are escalating, obviously, to say the least, in the Russia-Ukraine border region, 2 regions in Ukraine, described by some as separatist regions, though we had a couple of real talkers step up yesterday and say that characterization requires clarification. I thought that might be a good place to kick off right now, as Washington is announcing sanctions, Canada's announcing a first round of sanctions, Germany, Britain joining in, and of course the Canadian government approving a deployment of Canadian forces troops to Latvia as part of NATO's Operation Reassurance. What's actually going on? What does this mean? And where is this headed? Dr. Aurel Braun is a professor of international relations and political science at the University of Toronto. He's a center associate of the Davis Center at Harvard University. And Dr. Volodymyr Kravchenko is director of the Contemporary Ukraine Studies program at the University of Alberta. We're grateful to have both of you joining us this morning. Dr. Braun, why don't we start with you? Dr. Braun, how would you characterize these two regions in Ukraine that appear to be obviously targeted initially by Vladimir Putin? Yesterday characterized them on the show as somewhat separatist regions or breakaway regions, and some audience members immediately pushed back and said, that's not accurate. Can you provide a bit of a scene setter for us on the background to this region and why this is so significant and of interest to Russia?
It's not that this region per se is that important. After all, let's not forget that they attacked in Crimea, illegally occupied and annexed Crimea. And Vladimir Putin said that the problem is that Ukraine is not a legitimate state, that being Ukraine is not a nationality. So the approach by the Kremlin is that all of Ukraine ought to cease to exist. And what they appear to be doing is they are trying to get Ukraine slice by slice. So the eastern region is part of that. The separatists are largely Russian proxies. They would not exist. They would not have been able to conduct warfare but for Russia. And now Russia has come out to state formally what was known informally, and that is that they essentially control that region. Now they're going to they have accepted, they said, the independence of this regions, which is a prelude to annexation.
So this is obviously troubling to the international community, and I'm hoping that we can dig into the significance or the relevance of NATO here versus individual nations. Dr. Kravchenko, is at this point, is war, is conflict inevitable?
I'm afraid so, but I would like to add just a couple of words
Please.
to the analysis made by my colleague. I am a historian, I am not a political scientist, and I am used to think retrospectively. From my point of view, what we are witnessing now is just the agony of the Soviet system and further fragmentation of the Soviet space.
When you say that war is inevitable, can you take us into your thought process in arriving at that conclusion? What are you seeing that leads you to believe that? It's really scary. My feeling is that something terrible is growing up, is coming, and I feel completely helpless. I do remember 2014 when Mr. Putin annexed the Crimea and he launched the war in eastern Ukraine, especially Ukrainian cities, Donetsk, Kharkiv, Odessa, some others were targeted. But this time it's different. Everyone could monitor the escalation online, but nobody can stop it. What does this mean, Dr. Braun, first of all, for the people of Ukraine?
Well, it's obviously a grievous blow to the people of Ukraine, but I would suggest it's not that we are helpless. We have resources in the West. This should not have happened. The reason why this has happened is because NATO deterrence has failed, that the leadership of Mr. Biden has failed massively. Russia is not a superpower. Russia is but a remnant of a superpower. It has dominance in the region, but when you look at Russia, this is a country that has a gross domestic product in nominal terms roughly that of Italy's. So you look at the NATO countries by comparison, they produce at least 15 times as much as Russia does. They have vastly greater military resources, but they have not been able to come together to react, and they have not had the leadership. Mr. Biden seems to be leading from behind. Let's not forget that Mr. Biden was vice president at the time of the Crimean crisis when Crimea was taken over. Mr. Biden was vice president when the disastrous reset button was pressed, which encouraged Russia to believe that they can get away with things. This was following the invasion of Georgia. So the reset button was in 2009. That it was under the presidency of Mr. Biden that the United States had this catastrophic exit from Afghanistan. So the message that was sent, and sadly is being sent to an extent by United States and its allies, is one of largely helplessness. NATO as a feckless, helpless giant. And Mr. Putin is basically a scavenger. He looks for soft targets. And we have allowed Ukraine to be a soft target.
It's an interesting observation to hear you say Russia's not a superpower. It's the remnant of a superpower. You don't hear people say that all the time. And I think that the average person that's not an expert in that region or that doesn't completely understand the role of NATO or the dynamics in this part of the world may not be able to wrap their mind around what the factors that led to this and then what could quell potential conflict. To suggest that the United States or NATO has mismanaged this to a great degree is also perhaps to acknowledge that the United States would be probably the first country to intervene here. I mean, can we talk about the dynamic of NATO and the United States and the American interest in the region and what would prompt a meaningful military response from the U.S. and other NATO nations? Dr. Kravchenko, you want to take that one on first?
Just a few comments, if I may. Sometimes I feel like, Mr. Putin is guided not by realpolitik, but something like his inner voice rather than rational calculation. And who can predict what he is going to do next? And one other remark, Putin doesn't want to go to war with the West. He expects a new Munich, 1938, or Yalta, 1945. And let me be frank, I'm not sure how the West would react from this long perspective. Look at Putin's friends in Europe, look at some Balkan countries, and Ukraine is also vulnerable. Russia may be not a superpower compared to the United States, but Ukraine cannot stand, cannot resist without Western help.
And American involvement. And please correct me if I'm off on this. I mean, you may want to correct me and say NATO involvement, not American involvement. But as President Trump reminded everybody time and time again, NATO without the United States, in his perspective anyway, was somewhat feckless. What does this mean for the Americans, and what would prompt American military response, and what does that look like, and what does that do to elevate tensions, quite frankly, around the world? Dr. Braun.
Well, everything in terms of would NATO need to go to war with Russia? And this is what Putin has been using to try to suggest, we do have vast numbers of nuclear weapons, and this could escalate to a nuclear war. And would you want to risk doing that? The West doesn't want to have an armed conflict. But the reality is that the Ukrainian government and the people of Ukraine have not asked NATO to fight their battles for them. What they asked for are defensive armaments so they can defend themselves. And this has been denied to them. Under the Obama administration, they were not allowed to buy American armaments. Then a trickle was opened up, and under President Biden, that trickle continues instead of sending over the kind of armaments that they need to be able to inflict the damage on Russia. Ukraine does not need to be able to win a war outright with Russia. Russia has superior forces, but it needs to extract a cost, a sufficient cost that on that cost-benefit calculation. And I don't buy the notion that Mr. Putin is irrational. I think he's very rational. He's a clever tactician. Everywhere he went, he made a calculation which proved to be correct, that he could advance without a heavy cost. So that cost calculation has to be changed. Britain is trying to change that. Boris Johnson is sending more armaments. But look at the contrast in NATO. Germany sent 5,000 helmets. The mayor of Kiev joked, what are they going to send next? Pillows? Ukraine needs to be able to modernize its military. It needs to be able to offer real resistance. It needs economic help. It needs psychological links that the West reinforces that they are standing with Ukraine. So it has to be across the entire spectrum. And so far, the West has done a very poor job.
Okay, so we've mentioned some sanctions. You've touched on them as well. Boris Johnson, PM, says the United Kingdom would impose fresh sanctions on Russian banks and individuals. German Chancellor Scholz has suspended certification for a natural gas pipeline in response, which I guess the West is taking the position this could scale, up this inevitable, if you might say, invasion of Ukraine next. What does this mean for Canada? I mean, we mentioned that the Prime Minister committed about 450 troops, just over 450 troops as part of a NATO, sending them, by the way, to Latvia as part of Operation Reassurance. It's not an insignificant number of troops, but it hardly matches what we've seen as part of Russian military convoys on the way to this region. So, Dr. Kravchenko, maybe we start with you. What does this mean for Canada? What should Canadians be, through which lens should Canadians be viewing or perceiving or trying to understand this story?
Of course, Ukraine should be grateful to Canada for any help. And Ukrainian-Canadian relations are of special nature, taking into account very vocal and influential Ukrainian community in Canada. But forgive me, I'm a bit skeptical. Any economic and political sanctions are welcome, but they are of limited influence. Russian people would enjoy that. Those on the top would not be allowed to go abroad, to travel, to educate their children in Great Britain or United States. But we cannot judge Russian behavior, Russian country, Russian people with the same yardstick as any other European people. And Putin just demonstrated 2 days ago that his attitude towards Ukraine is very special, is very emotional, and we can talk about it, but nevertheless, everybody saw it. And back to Canada, what can Canada do? Except what she is doing? Like I said, we are grateful to Canada. It's a great country, but in terms of global actor, Canadians' ability to help is also limited.
Yeah, Putin describing that connection to that region or to Ukraine in general as a spiritual one in his impassioned speech. Dr. Braun, do you agree with the assessment there, or how do you perceive Canada's role to look over the next while?
I would assign a much greater weight to Canada than my colleague has. We are a significant player in international relations, much more significant than many of us realize. We are a member of the group of G7. We are a member of NATO. We were the midwives, so to speak, for the creation of NATO. We are highly respected. So what we do has not only substantive, but it also has symbolic importance. So the fact that Canada withheld armaments from Ukraine until recently was important. That we now decided to sell defensive armaments sends a powerful message. We have a very strong interest in Canada, not just because we have a large Ukrainian diaspora, but because we are a member of NATO. We are helping to defend the Baltic states. We have troops in Latvia. We had them before, and we sent more. And if you look at Vladimir Putin's demands, his demands were not only against Ukraine. Ukraine is the start of his demands. He basically was demanding the reversal of what happened in terms of NATO enlargement. He wants to have all troops from NATO, even on a rotating basis, to be withdrawn from East European states, whether it's Poland, Romania, leaving these states naked. He's also saying that you cannot allow, they would not stand for any further enlargement of NATO. Well, there are two countries that may be asking for NATO membership, which are not in Eastern Europe, but they're getting close to NATO. That is Finland, and that is Sweden. 48% of Swedes now want in NATO. Is Russia going to invade them? Canada is also facing Russia across the Arctic, where the Russians have militarized the Arctic, where they try to control Arctic routes. So we have a very powerful interest in right-sizing Russia. Russia should be respected as every other state is respected. But there's a difference between respect and deference, between having a policy of equity and fairness and one that rests on appeasement and endless concessions. And what Mr. Putin fears the most is not NATO. What he fears the most is democracy. His fear is that Ukraine could become a successful democracy, and it would present an alternate model to the ultra-nationalistic kleptocracy that is running inside Russia.
I want to ask both of you about this Al Jazeera report that describes the average Russian's response to Vladimir Putin's decision to recognize the republics as a negative one. Russians bemoan Putin's decision to recognize the republics. So says the report in Al Jazeera. Dr. Kravchenko, you want to take this one on first? What's your perception? I mean, we're asking you to characterize hundreds of millions of people here and their positions, which is a difficult, if not foolhardy exercise. But the average Russian thinks this is a good idea, is a bit nervous about this, thinks that this has been a long time coming. Where do they land?
I didn't see the article you just mentioned, and I wouldn't rely on Al Jazeera's judgment, but believe me, the Russians will do what they are told to do, even though they are not supportive to this or that action. Did you see Putin's council on Monday? All members of the council, highly ranked politicians, generals, they were trembling. They mumbling in fear of saying the wrong thing. It looks like the Stalin Politburo. I was really shocked when I saw this picture. And there is no political opposition in Russia, only moral, limited to several hundred intellectuals. And did you hear anything from the Russian Orthodox Church? Something you shouldn't kill? I didn't. So I do believe that Russian civil society is not able to exert any influence on the decisions made by only one person, the almighty supreme leader, and they will support it.
Dr. Braun, do you agree with that assessment?
I would not dismiss Russian civil society. It is under threat, and Vladimir Putin clearly understands that the development of civil society is something dangerous for the kind of dictatorial, corrupt rule that he's running. This is why opposition leaders have been attacked. Boris Nemtsov was killed. This is why Navalny was poisoned and is sitting in jail. But there are often huge demonstrations in Russia, which shows that the people of Russia, especially younger people of Russia, do not want to live in a dictatorship. But the Kremlin controls much of the media. It is able to manipulate the population. It is using security services to suppress any kind of dissent. And often in dictatorships, they look strong and stable until they cease to be strong and stable and fall apart very quickly. This is the history of what happened in Eastern Europe. This is what happened in the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, Putin is strong, and in other ways, he's very vulnerable. He's acting with some arrogance, but he's also acting out of desperation. He knows that if Ukraine doesn't fall apart, if Ukraine becomes a successful state, a prosperous, stable democracy, this would present a danger of contamination in Russia. This would be a mortal danger. That's one reason he wants to stop this. So I don't accept that there is just this kind of emotional assessment by him that he just doesn't want to see the breakup of the mythical Russian people. There may be certainly some beliefs. We don't know exactly the thinking of anyone, but going on the basis of his actions, there's also cold geostrategic calculation. Mr. Putin, first and foremost, wants to stay in power. And this is why he had these constitutional changes, which allow him to stay in power just about indefinitely.
That was Dr. Aurel Braun, professor of international relations, political science at the University of Toronto, a center associate of the Davis Center at Harvard University. Dr. Volodymyr Kravchenko is director of the Contemporary Ukraine Studies program at the University of Alberta. We have benefited from both of your insight today, and we appreciate it. Thank you for this.
Thank you for having me.
I know that this is obviously a story that's of great interest to many people for obvious reasons, but for different reasons, I think, as well. I was kind of trying to keep an eye on our live chat as we're having this conversation. Many people are saying, we've still got family in this region, or my family came from there. A lot of you talking about some of the most common names back in the days of the thick paper phone book. Though I think some phone books still get delivered. You got to wonder why. It was the last time you used a phone book.
I have a stack. They keep getting delivered to my house, and I have a stack of them in my garage to start fires with.
That's a great idea.
Yes.
Or for feats of strength.
Yeah, also good. Yeah. Except they're only about this thick now.
Oh, that's right. So
yeah.
it's not as much. It's not like it used to be with the Power Team when they could rip phone books in half. But to get serious for a second, people saying like back in the day with the paper phone books, they'd say if you were in central Alberta or if you were in east of Edmonton, for that matter, anywhere near Edmonton, half the book, or at least some of the dominating surnames there, would be Ukrainian names. This is a story that is of great interest to many Canadians and, of course, people around the world. This is a volatile region. I mean, you got the United States and Russia staring each other down. And so we'll continue to pursue understanding and insight around this from sources, excellent ones like those two. And I'm grateful that they were here. Please feel free to share our content. Let people know where you're hearing these interviews. And, of course, smash that like button if you like what you're seeing right here on Real Talk. Coming up in a few minutes, we're going to take you out to Jasper. We're going to meet Western Canada's first male doula a little later on in the show. I'm looking forward to that. I have AJ's email locked and loaded. AJ was in touch yesterday, just a very short time, about an hour after our group chat roundtable wrapped. We talked about the Ottawa occupation and the dissipation of the occupation, the clearing of Coots, the United Conservative Party's budget coming up, and Jason Kenney's leadership review, and, of course, the Conservative Party leadership review. And AJ had a couple of thoughts that I wanted to make sure we put out there in front of you. Right now, let me remind you how proud we are to be presenting Real Talk's Wine of the Month for the month of February. It's Kendall Jackson. And if you go check out their website right now at kj.com, you can see their KJ garden boxes. You can visit the winery. You know, it's still family owned. If you know American wines, especially, I mean, the beautiful West Coast wines, you know that Kendall Jackson is one of these legacy brands, still family owned and operated. Check out, when you're on their website, again, easy, kj.com, their sustainability initiatives. They're doing amazing things to leave as small a footprint as possible, including integrating solar into their bottling operation. They use a third less water than any other vineyard in the region. It's a fascinating story. They say making great wine starts with respect for the land, the community, and future generations. You can feel good about purchasing and drinking Kendall Jackson wine. You can find it anywhere you find fine wines, and if you don't see it on the shelf, you ask for it. You let them know you heard about Kendall Jackson on Real Talk. A big shout out to our friends at Local Waste. You know, they present Trash Talk every Friday, and I keep talking to you about how they're growing and growing and growing. Well, they're also evolving their brand to local, environmental, and a big day yesterday. Exciting news from our friends over there announcing that both Calahoo Waste Disposal and Meridian Waste Disposal are now a part of their growing Alberta team. You can learn more about what they're doing and what this expansion means. Obviously, of course, from a service provision side, it's big. What about from an employment side? Check out localenvironmental.ca, and congratulations from our team to theirs for their sustained and continued growth. Friesen Brothers, when you want to talk about Alberta businesses and you want to talk about family-owned businesses, you can't ignore this one. For more than 65 years, Friesen Brothers has been Alberta-grown, Alberta-owned, and family has always come first. That means putting the freshest food, convenient options, and healthy choices out there for you to put on your table. You know that the first of the month, it's coming up in less than a week, is 15% off orders, or rather grocery bills of more than $75 at all 16 locations. Visit a Friesen Brothers in your neck of the woods. And heads up, by the way, coming up on March 5th, we're going to be celebrating the first birthday of Friesen Brothers Rabbit Hill store, their store in South Edmonton that has just ramped up the grocery game in Alberta's capital city like you wouldn't believe. Really remarkable stuff. Let's get to this email. AJ wrote it in about 11 a.m. Mountain Time yesterday. That was just about an hour, I guess, after our panel wrapped, an hour and a half. He says, Tuesday panel thoughts. And this was an email that caught my attention. He says, Real Talk team, thanks for putting together, as always, stellar programming, including things I disagree with but still listen to. AJ, love it. Says the panel you had on Tuesday morning, Jenny Adams, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, was quite insightful, interesting to hear, as they spoke about this lack of leadership with the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, which I somewhat understand and agree with. At no point did anybody bring up Ontario's Premier Doug Ford. Like, what? Says AJ, the Ambassador Bridge was blocked and Ottawa sieged. You know, that was Doug's words, he says. And the conversation around abdication of leadership was rightfully had, except it was missing a major player, the province, the provincial government. And I get that all three panelists are maybe wired conservative in their politics, and maybe I'm way too left for their liking. I don't know how Harman would feel about being characterized. Harman's kind of like Harman ran for the Progressive Conservatives as a candidate, but he's more heavy on the progressive than the conservative.
I was about to say, he's kind of, he always strikes me as kind of takes that middle road.
Yeah.
Really sort of nice.
Like he's not a lefty.
No.
Unless, I guess, in Alberta, if you are a progressive conservative, you kind of are smeared as a lefty anyway. But I digress. Back to AJ's email. He says, I appreciate how they represent a fairly straightforward, non-offensive view of conservatism. Disagreeable? Yes, but not offensive. That said, I'm annoyed with the entire where was Trudeau conversation. I'm not a Trudeau fan, but honestly, can we at least have this conversation about leadership while remembering where division of power exists between orders of government? Like, why are we laying blame federally when the province has a major hand to play here? Ottawa, unlike Washington, D.C., is not a district outside of provincial boundaries. The Ambassador Bridge, while a major international point of entry, is actually a bridge under provincial jurisdiction. The border crossing is federal. That's it. That was like when Joan Crockett was on the show. We kind of had that debate about whether Coots was Justin Trudeau or Jason Kenney's problem based on its proximity to the actual border. If you missed that, that was a good roundtable too. AJ says, so yeah, let's have a discussion of where leadership failed to show up. Absolutely. The Prime Minister has part of the blame to share in how late to the game he was, but to do so without acknowledging lack of leadership shown by Ontario's Premier, the Ford government, does nobody any favors. And if you loop in Ottawa's mayor, says all levels of government failed miserably, playing hot potato with this crisis. But thank you for having the panel on. Thank you for making me yell at my computer screen from home, making my dog wonder what on earth I'm doing for work. That from AJ. Thanks for listening while you work, AJ. We appreciate it. Every Wednesday, we fill our lungs with fresh air as best we can. Sometimes it's metaphorically. But we remind ourselves how lucky we are to have beautiful Jasper National Park right here as a crown jewel of Canada. We call it MyJasper Memories, presented by our friends at Tourism Jasper. And sometimes we'll reflect on times that we've spent out there. Sam was just out there. My family was just out there. We love Jasper. And then sometimes we want to give you a heads up on some of the cool things that are coming up. I mean, ways that you can get involved out there. I mean, you want to really fill your lungs. What about going for a nice big run out there surrounded by this cathedral? I mean, these mountain ranges, unbelievable. This is your official heads up. Today's a great day to start training for the Jasper Half Marathon. It's coming up on April 23rd. That means that you've got 2 months to train, exactly 2 months from today. Runners can kick off your spring with a scenic and cheery road race through a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I mean, there's half marathons that'll take you through the concrete jungles of some downtown major metropolis. But what about Jasper? I mean, so maybe you're going, okay, yeah, sure, but I don't know, 21.1K, half marathon, I'm not sure I'm up for that. Well, they've also got the 10Ks and the 5Ks, which is certainly doable. You can get your kids involved as well in the family fun run, which I know everybody always enjoys. Your entry packages include a whole bunch of things. You get your short sleeve running shirt. You got to sign up before April 1st for that. You get a medal at the finish line regardless of your time. Awards for the top 3 in every age group of the 21, 10, and 5K events. There's chip timing, so you know you're getting your exact time recorded and live event updates so people can follow along. Professional traffic control stations along the way, they look after you. This is top shelf from start to finish, literally. Post-race snacks that you want to talk about afterward, eligibility for some draw prizes, and of course, a charitable donation to the Jasper Healthcare Foundation. You can learn more by checking out our website in partnership with them. You go to jasper.travel/realtalk, and you'll be able to learn more about how to sign up for the Jasper. I mean, this is coming up, again, April 23rd, the Jasper Half Marathon. Circle your calendars. And by the way, you can also view all of the other past MyJasper Memories features that we've had on here. Some amazing stories about the history of the national park, reconciliation that's happening out there, some of the natural beauty around the falls, the cabin culture out there, the best patios as we start to get into spring and summer. And of course, if you feel up to it, if you're out there lucky enough to be posting photos on Instagram or Twitter, we'd love to see them. Make sure you hashtag MyJasper and Real Talk RJ. You never know when your posts could be featured right here on Real Talk, a proud partner of Tourism Jasper. Well, looking forward to this conversation because this is kind of real for me. This is relevant for me. Our family's expecting. We shared that news with you a while ago, and so I'm preparing to be a dad for the second time. And my wife and I know that many of you are as well, because, by the way, when we announced our pregnancy, some of you chimed in and said, oh my gosh, the timing's the same. We're going to have these summer babies together, and I'm so excited for all of you. The calling of a doula. It seems like more and more people are talking about doulas. I mean, maybe that's just my observation in my friend group. I didn't even know what a doula did 10 years ago. Now it seems like almost everybody's hiring them. And I'm particularly intrigued by the perspective of our next guest. Alykhan Sumar is the first male doula in Western Canada. Through the course of the pandemic, or at least in the last little while, went from a business analyst to a doula. Pretty interesting calling here. Check this out. This post from Full Circle Birth Collective announcing he was coming on. They say, we're excited to welcome him to our team as Western Canada's first cisgendered male doula to our community. Doula support for men and non-birthing partners. What a pleasure to welcome Alykhan to the program. Thanks for making time for us. Good morning to you.
Thanks so much for having me, Ryan.
I've got a big thing for sweaters, and I'm going to be honest. You've just popped up on the screen for the first time, seeing you for the first time here. I've some major sweater envy. You look like the most comfortable man in Canada right now. What took you from business analyst to doula? Was doula on your radar? Had you always wanted to be one? I mean, what tell us what this journey looked like for you?
To be honest, actually, this wasn't on the radar in a sense that this wasn't going to be like the main gig for me for quite some time. But the pandemic changed everything, and the journey for me really started, I guess, three and a half years ago when my second one was born, and luckily enough we had a doula for the second one. And I wish every minute that we had it for the first one. The experiences that we had were completely different, and that's just with someone who was just focused on my wife. My wife primarily, but on both of us, but primarily her. There was nobody who was sitting there and was there making sure that I was centered in the moment. And even though Sonia did, who's my mentor, who's been on the show before, it was an incredible help. I really still felt like I needed someone who could be there for me, who came at it from my perspective, who could then talk to me about that. And I know that there's so many guys out there and male presenting partners that actually want to be more involved, but just don't know how. And so that's really the pandemic hit. There was some time to really think about what was important in life and centering around my family. It's like, I need to get into this. I've been talking about this for so long. Let's just do it now.
Wow. So you're okay. So to be clear, it's not like you're a male doula or a male doula for non-birthing partners because you are a male and you are a doula. You're a doula for dudes, basically, or to be more inclusive, we'd say for men and non-birthing partners. So your role is not necessarily, or never, correct me if I'm wrong, the doula for the person that's carrying the baby.
My primary target market is looking at those men or male presenting or the non-birthing partners, the
Sure.
people who are not actively involved in actually birthing the child. I mean, if there's a couple that wants me to do that, I will enter that field. But I do not want to kind of tiptoe on the work that women and doulas are doing across the province and across Canada already. That's not the purpose here. The purpose here is to target the other segment.
Yeah.
And it's really because, like, when you sit down and think about it, it's kind of like, I call them like TSN turning points. There's always these key moments during birth where the other partner has to be actively involved, and there's a critical point. And if that partner isn't there at that critical point, then the experience can change drastically and can change very negatively. And that it can affect, how you interact with your child. It can affect how you interact with your partner moving forward, and it has huge ramifications moving forward. And so it's kind of one of those things that we have people who prep people for hours and hours and hours for a 3-hour SAT test. Why are we not prepping people to be ready for birth? That is one of the most life-changing, sort of changing moments of your life.
Sure. So how do you do what you do? You meet with the couple, or you meet with individuals for months ahead of time or weeks ahead of time? Are you there in the room? Are you at the hospital? Are you in the home if it's a home birth? I mean, what does your involvement or your relationship with your clients look like?
So the way that the relationship has been planned out right now is to first start like a few weeks or months before. And that is really based on what the comfort level is of the non-birthing partner and the couple itself. So it's really just, I want to get you there. I want to make sure that you're prepped and ready to go. And that can take, it can take 3 sessions. It could take, maybe 6 or 7 sessions with me to kind of go through that. And there's some packages that I've put together for that. And then as we get closer and closer to the date, then it is about me being there either as a support over the phone, or if someone wants me to be there, then to be there. And again, my job is not to impinge on the midwife or, the OB who's involved, or if there is another doula, just, for the couple who's primarily concentrating on the birthing partner, is to be, I'm the person on the outside to make sure that male or that non-birthing partner is engaged in the right way in that moment.
Yeah.
That can be,
where do you see that people aren't? Like, there's something about the whole miracle of birth. I mean, there's just something about it's just absolutely surreal. Obviously, it's incredible. The whole thing is just incredible. What are you keeping an eye on with regards to the one that's not doing the heavy lifting, but the partner that's there just like cheering or kind of doing or completely overwhelmed or in some circumstances fainting? Like where can people drop the ball, and what would be an example of something where you might go, hey, heads up, this is a big moment?
Actually, I think the fainting moment's kind of funny because I think that's a presentation of the media that's really interesting. It really just is like looking, if I'm going to be there in the room, or if I'm looking at the guy over FaceTime or something like that, it really just is seeing that glazed look on their face, or that moment where, they're trying to find connection. And then I sit down and be like, okay, so what's happening in this moment right now? And it's not me necessarily to tell them what to do. It's just, by that point, it's really just for them. It's also instinct that wants to take over. That person wants to be involved. That's why they're there in the room. That's why they want, that's why they've arranged so that they can be there. And so really it is just empowering them and being like, okay, we've talked about this. What do you want to do? What do you think your partner needs right now? And making sure that those two things are in line. And I mean, there's been a ton of research done about this, is that like, since very much we've, medicalized birth in a way that is like, it's a black box. Women go in and, one person goes in and two people come out, or three people come out, or four people come out, depending on where you are. That's two people come out and a family comes out. Two people go in, family comes out. And that's just making sure that you're doing what you wanted to do. And that when your partner needs you to engage in those critical moments, that you're there and ready. And if you need just a little bit of a nudge, I'm there to help you.
We knew that these questions were going to be coming. We were kind of chuckling about it, as a matter of fact, and I know that you'll welcome them. But on our live chat, we got people like Kimmy says, I'm definitely interested in this, but I do feel like the focus should be on the other partner, but I'm keeping an open mind through this conversation. I love that, Kimmy. That's great feedback. Kim says, because hetero men need more attention while their wives are giving birth. Kim says, I'm a little confused. People will believe probably, and for obvious reasons, and if I had to pick a side, I might align with them just for my own personal safety, that the person that's doing all the work on delivery day is the one that needs all the support. So how do you respond to people that say, really? Like, this guy's rolling in with his own doula? Like, what do you say to the objectors?
What I'd say to the objectors is, this is one of those things where the attention is not on the hetero man at all in that sense. It very much is the hetero man wants to pay attention there. It's just me being the coach to say, you go and do it.
Yeah, but can I also jump in and ask, like, the show's called Real Talk. Does it matter if the man is hetero? Not every man is hetero.
No,
we have friends that have donated. Like, it's completely, the word is irrelevant. It supercharges the question, but yes. I'm going to say that I think that the word is irrelevant.
Yes, and it really just is that the person who is not doing the birthing work has a role and has a job to play in that room if that couple or if that family wants it to be. My job is to make sure that that person feels empowered to do that. It's not about paying attention to that person. And really, if I'm the only person in the room, I will be making sure that both parties, as much as they feel comfortable, are feeling empowered, safe, and secure. I mean, birth is still one of those places that feels very sometimes often like cave-like to me, the nesting period, the preparation for it, but the birthing partner is doing all of that. The non-birthing partner is like, I have no connection to this child up until the child comes out, and all of a sudden it's like, here you go. And and you need to build that over time so that you're ready for it when it comes.
And I can say, because I've been part of these conversations with friends of mine, and I'm pretty sure we're not outliers or we're not alone on it. For a lot of parents, in particular, I think dads or the non-birthing partners, there's a sense that kind of the baby doesn't even, and I mean, not technically, I don't really mean this, but that you kind of feel a little bit irrelevant in a way for a number of months. You do your best to be a support and everything. Obviously, you better. But there's kind of there's this immediate connection, right?
Yes.
And then as somewhat what can feel like the outsider, that connection I mean, obviously you love your child like mad, but it can develop a little bit more over time. I've heard a lot of my buddies say that. That's a real thing.
It definitely is. And like that, it's something that's so important. And like, you don't have 10 months of growing something inside you to get ready. It's the moment happens, the baby comes out, and it's like, okay, so now instant connection. Okay, now be a father. And especially the first time around, you're like, I have no idea what to do. The second time, you're like, I have no idea what to do because I got one kid who's crying on this side, I got the other one who's crying on this side. Which one do I prioritize? And my partner, the birthing partner, needs me. So how do I prioritize things? How do I make sure that all of these things work without going crazy, like having a little bit of a moment? And in those moments where everyone is needing time, attention, affection, that needs you to be present, you need to be make sure that you're empowered to be in that moment and to be present, whether that's at the birth, whether that's afterwards, knowing what to do. Because when the birthing partner is in that space and they need safety and security, and they just need to be sort of, I use this word very gently, but just to be sort of in that primal instinct of birth where they're kind of, phasing out and they need to be in a completely different space. It's your job to make sure that everything else that's around the room that is non-medical gets taken care of. Like, I'm not a midwife, I'm not an OB, I'm not going to get involved in any of the medical stuff. I'm going to get involved in emotional support, in mental support, to make sure that non-birthing partner is in that moment, so that the non-birthing partner can be not in that moment, but doing what they need to do to make sure that this baby comes out in the way that it needs to.
Yeah. Genevieve says, I had a doula and a midwife. I think for a partner that needs an outside support, non-family, non-judgmental, this would be really great. Some people say that they're torn on this. That's fine. And you always have the right, then don't hire a doula. If you're torn on it, that's kind of how I feel about it, to be honest with you. Lalazaz says, I've had babies. Believe me, I was perfectly capable of telling the soon-to-be dad exactly what to do and exactly what not to do. Others are wondering about how you're training, how you get ready for this, how you get into the field. Tracy says, the intro made it sound like you just decided to do this and felt your calling, so you did. What does the training look like? How do you prepare to do this?
So the training is actually it's quite extensive for what to become a doula. So I mean, I suppose anybody can go out there and say, well, I'm supporting, I'm a birth worker, I like to support work, but to be a doula requires, for me, in terms of like certification. So I've been being mentored under the person who leads the Full Circle Birth Collective, which is someone who's been on the show before, Sonia Duffy, Sega, and she is incredible. She's had 25 years of experience. She's done over 1,000 births that she's attended personally. She was actually trained as a midwife, but because of Alberta in those days, ended up becoming a doula instead. I mentor under her. I've taken, there's a whole set of courses and an inquiry certification process that needs to be done. There's a few certification agencies that are there, but being a doula and being a certified doula, and I'm just a student in that sense right now. I have a few things I need to get done. I have an exam to write. I've got to get my number of births under my belt. But to become a certified doula is a journey that is not something that I can just turn around and do in a month. Yeah, it is something that requires a lot of time, a lot of effort. They leave you a couple of years to get it done, and it is a process. And so it's not just something I could turn around and say, I want to do this tomorrow, so I'm just going to do it. It does require some work. And so while this has been announced in the last 5 or 6 weeks, I took my courses last year in the summer, and I've kind of been working up until this moment, to a point where I can be comfortable to say, I'm ready now. I'm ready to be coaching people. So I'm actually also taking some coaching courses as well, because I'm coaching dads and non-birthing partners through all of this, and to set things up so that it's the most ideal for people in Alberta and across the country is something that's taken a lot of time to think about, but is something that has been in play for over a year now, if more formally, but informally over the last 3 years.
It's cool. You're following your calling. I think it's great. Like I'm guessing that business analyst. I don't know anything about your prior career, but you're probably pretty stable, probably making a pretty good living. Like everything's comfortable. It takes guts to do something like this, and it's neat. And it's like, I love stories of people that just decide to follow their calling without guarantees. And most people will listen to this on a podcast. They can't see that you got a big smile on your face right now. But what did your former business colleagues think of this? Your fellow business analysts, are they still wrapping their minds around it?
I know. I'll be fairly honest. There's very much a mixed bag about this. There's some people who are like, I don't know. Like, is this something? Is this something that's real? Is this something that I had my buddy of mine in Toronto who recently had a baby. He's like, but my experience was so different. Like, we didn't need any of that stuff. Pandemic baby, all this stuff. I'm like, this is not for everyone. It's not something that nobody really thinks about this. Like, a lot of people don't think about doulas in general. That's changing right now. I can see that changing in terms of the number of clients that are coming in the door, and also just generally what's out there in terms of information. The fact that also, we had doulas here. You had a prenatal, like a postpartum and a end of life doula on, a few months ago. And now to shift gears here a little bit and kind of take it into a new and emerging market. Yeah, there's nobody that does this, and not everyone's going to get it. And then there's this other population. It's like, man, I wish that I had that. I wish that there was somebody there who just walked me through it, who was just a support, who, was there that I could call at 11 o'clock at night, and my wife is trying to sleep, and I'm holding my baby, and I'm just so frustrated because of so many different things that I haven't had time to process, and I don't have time to process all this stuff. And I got no one to talk to. I wish you were there at that point in time. Like, I got a phone with my really good friend yesterday. He's like, I'm so excited for you. This is going to be so great. And I just wish so much. There's so much sometimes regret from the non-birthing partner that they weren't there in that moment. And I just want to shift that. I just want to shift it so that when you look back at it, it's not something that you don't like, and then something that you regret, or there's harm being caused as from the non-birthing partner or even from the birthing partner. Because how many times in those first 2 to 5 years of your kid's life do you recount the birthing story to everybody who's around you? And if every single time it goes from being a kind of neutral or to a negative place where you're almost re-traumatizing yourself by trying to tell the story in a way that doesn't make the non-birthing partner look like they weren't in the room, or they weren't present, or they did harm, to something that's positive and said, wow, this was an amazing experience for both of us. We ended up coming out and stronger. That it's so powerful, and it's life changing for people.
Yeah. Well, I think it's super cool, and I know that you've still got some ground to cover with regards to building up this career, and I would imagine that the more resources are available, the more that people will tap into them, and it's a really neat position, as if you don't know this already, that you have within that family dynamic. Super cool stuff. People can check out fullcirclebirthcollective.com if they want to learn more. If you're listening to what Alykhan Sumar is saying and you're intrigued by it, you'd like to learn more about those services and the availability of doulas, or what that relationship looks like, or even doula training, check out the website. And thanks for making time for us on Real Talk today. We love this type of stuff.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. That's a cool conversation. That's a neat calling. And some people, it's fine if you got no use for something. There's a lot of things I've got no use for, and I think are not a good fit for me. And some things I go, wow, that could be pretty interesting stuff. I think that this might be a fit for some families. I always think when we do, and we'll check in with Sarah Hoyles in just a second. When we have conversations like this, I often wonder, like, this interview might land with one person, somebody that's out like walking their dog, or they're on a road trip, they're listening to the pod, they're out for a jog, and all of a sudden this interview that they hear might actually kind of, in a way, you might roll your eyes, but I mean it, because we get emails that are like this. It'll change the course of their life, right? It'll be something different for them, and whether that's a calling that they pursue, or whether it's hiring someone like Alykhan, or whatever the case is. That's not lost on us, that you never know who's going to hear this when they need to hear it. The story of personal transformation in the career journey is an interesting one. Kind of teased this up nicely. Wanted to let you know about this new AI ethics, artificial intelligence ethics micro-credential through Power Ed at Athabasca University. You can check it out at powered.athabascau.ca. The certificate is open for registration right now with immediate access. AI ethics and introduction. And then AI ethics and data. You know, we've all seen the headlines about unethical chat bots, right? I mean, maybe more now than ever. Controversial uses of facial recognition software, misinformation on social media, and of course, discriminatory algorithms. You remember that interview that we had right here on Real Talk a few months ago about that? These aren't edge cases. AI is increasingly a part of these systems, and it's raising the stakes on the need to implement ethical practices in the deployment, the development of technology. If this is floating your boat, if you're intrigued, don't delay. Check out today, powered.athabascau.ca. Everybody's talking about power bills, natural gas bills right now, right? I mean, you take a look at even what people want to hear or see in the budget in Alberta coming up on Thursday. They want relief from these high utility prices. Premier says they're coming. We'll see what that looks like. Park Power has been here on this show the whole time, reminding you about their fixed rates at parkpower.ca. It's time to get off that regulated rate option. They call it the RRO. It's that variable style rate. And of course, it's fluctuating right now around double the cost of the fixed rates that Park Power offers. Today is a great day to go to parkpower.ca, compare their rates on internet, electricity, and natural gas. And by the way, if you bundle them together, the utility bundles, when you bring them on to provide 2 or 3 of their services, they offer savings on admin fees. So there's that, and then there's the promo code 2022-Real Talk, which gets you $70 off your first bill. 2022-Real Talk, $70 off your first power bill at parkpower.ca. I told you yesterday about St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge, and go on their website sometimes just out of personal interest to check out what they've got in stock. You can use that handy search tool right there on the homepage. Check out all years, all makes, all models, even a maximum price. Maybe you've got a budget in mind. You're looking to upgrade maybe your SUV. Maybe you're even looking ahead to the summer. What are you going to use to get out and pull that trailer or get the family out camping? It's a great day to browse the new and used inventory at St. Albert and Sherwood Dodge. You can link to their dealerships under the sponsors tab on our website. And our friends at the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park want me to let you know that they've got a brand new burger menu out with some huge highlights. If you're feeling that hunger today and you're anywhere near the Dairy Queens in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road, why not check out their signature stack burgers? The Bacon 2-Cheese Deluxe, the original cheeseburger. That's the classic DQ burger. Their loaded steakhouse burger, the mushroom cheeseburger, and of course, the single, double, or triple flamethrower. It's just fun to say, even funner to eat. At the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. When you rip through that drive-thru or when you're at the counter picking up your order, you let them know that Real Talk sent you to the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Sarah Hoyles, the editorial producer of this show, checking in from her home studio where all the magic happens. What a what, right? I mean, this is where the show comes together, Hoyles. Let's not make, Sam and I, we whip up a couple margaritas, we put our feet up at the end of the day, and then you just go to work. So people can't even hear the blender during the show. We keep our microphones muted. But that conversation with Alykhan, that was fascinating. You saw the pushback coming from a mile away.
Oh, yeah. Like, oh, come on. This person is carrying a human being inside of them for 9 months, and then they have to deliver them.
Yeah.
Either through C-section or natural birth. And we're worried about this person over here? Really?
Yeah. This is the evolution of it, though, right? With more and more resources.
I think so. But I personally, I mean, as an aunt, I remember being able to hold the very first grandchild and being like, I'm going to drop him. I don't want to hold him. I was terrified I was going to drop him. And I'm the auntie. So I just think about, what kind of seismic change a delivery of a child is in a family's life, and being able to prepare each family member so they can, be there and show up, like whether that means, rubbing the back or just like hearing the other person out. I don't know. To me, I'm kind of like, no harm, no foul. Like if there's some more support, heck yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's really neat. I don't know. I was trying to figure out, is that a fit for me? Like would that be, and this is no offense to him, and I know he wouldn't take offense to it, but sometimes I appreciate the counsel and I'd appreciate the guidance, and then sometimes I just kind of want people to leave me alone so I can be in my zone. You know, and if I'm in my zone and then somebody's trying to get in my zone, then I don't love it. So I don't know. The whole time I was thinking, I don't know how I don't know if this would be a fit for me, but we'll see. But we're talking about this. I mean, there's all kinds of supports that, you know, and people that have more experience are going to be rolling their eyes like I'm just hearing about this now. But, you know, there's like the doula or the midwife, and like you can, you know, obviously be in the hospital, like loaded up with their, like, give me all the drugs, shoot it right into my spine, give me all the drugs. And then some people are like,
are we talking about the birthing person?
Yeah, no, I'm not talking. And then there's people that are like, I'm just going to chew on a stick, like old school style, and just push it out. I don't want the drugs. I'm going to do it at home. People have home births. People have the pools set up in their home. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways to do it. And then after the arrival of the little cherub, you know, there's like night doulas and night nurses and all different kinds of supports that some people, you know, would integrate into their routine to make sure that it's a little bit easier for everybody. So, yeah, I mean, there's no right way to do it. The right way to do it is what's right for you, right? Mm-hmm. I should see if I could say right in a sentence more than that. The right way to do it is the right way that's right for you, right? Hoyles, do we want to go kind of like bummer right now and talk about the accountability for the Ottawa occupation, or do we want to do the good news? Let's do bad news, good news, or maybe it's good news on both fronts, depending on your perspective, but we'll talk about pay for the U.S. women's soccer team in just a second. But yesterday we saw a couple of faces that are becoming, I think, a little bit more familiar to Canadians. They're quite familiar to some. Patrick King and Tamara Litch, and I never know if I'm pronouncing your last name right, but appearing in front of judges yesterday. These are the organizers, essentially, of this convoy. And those that were at least some of the more prominent ones involved in this occupation, and it's getting pretty serious for them right now.
Yeah, I would like to refer to them as infamous. They are infamous.
Yes.
Patrick King, one of the key organizers, he's actually he's going to remain in custody until Friday, when a judge will decide if he will be released on bail. In the meantime, a woman in Alberta has said that she's only known him for 4 weeks. And she's offering the surety of half the value of her home in Alberta to guarantee his bail.
That's a bad idea.
This feels like someone writing to somebody in jail. Like, I fell in love with him. I don't know. Patrick King faces charges of mischief, counseling to commit mischief, counseling to commit the offense of disobeying a court order, and counseling to obstruct police.
Are those even? I don't know. This is a serious question. Are those even serious charges? They are serious, Sam? You're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You can get a life sentence for mischief. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned in the last week, like hearing the court proceedings and the charges and the police proceedings play out here, is like, mischief is not, you know, teenagers painting dumpsters. It's like, mischief is a serious charge that can land you a life sentence.
I had no idea. Like, it sort of feels like mischief is like, no dessert for you. Like,
you've been causing mischief.
You mischievous mischief maker. No dessert for you today. Okay, so it's serious. And then Tamara Litch denied bail by an Ontario court judge, saying they believe there was substantial likelihood she would reoffend if released. This is I'm not trying to work too hard to draw lines between stories, but the court's conviction. Or conviction's an interesting word to use in that context. Let me say the court's gut instinct, the court's belief, the judge's belief that these people are likely to reoffend, in a way, bolsters the case for the Emergencies Act, doesn't it? If there's belief that these people are going to reoffend, in other words, occupy again, convoy again, block borders again, isn't that justification in a way, or an argument to keep the Emergencies Act in place? Kind of strikes at me as that. I know that I'm wading into a combustible zone here, but that's the way it strikes me.
Well, depending on who you are, like in the panel discussion yesterday, saying like, where is Justin Trudeau?
Yeah.
The fact being that, you know, what has happened, what has transpired, there hasn't been a lot of guidance from the provincial government where the jurisdiction is. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean,
can I say though, I tweeted, I don't know what it was, a couple of weeks ago, and I basically said that I don't remember exactly what I said, but something along the lines of like, there's been a lack of leadership across the board. I said, perhaps most notably the Prime Minister, where is he? And people were saying like, what do you not understand about jurisdictions? What do you not understand about the provinces? And I'm not talking about Justin Trudeau trying to overstep or misunderstand how the structure of government works and the roles of different governments and scenarios. But I'm saying if you looked at, for example, Washington, D.C. under siege, or any other world, like I'm talking about a nation's capital, any other country in the world that is occupied with honking of horns and people furious and thousands of, like, there would at least be a statement. Like the news stations would cut in, like, live from the Oval Office. Here's the president who would urge calm and talk about the conversation. Earlier today, I spoke with Governor whomever, or I spoke with the senators from whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that was when I was saying, where's the prime minister? And people are going, he had COVID. And these are all, valid and true observations that are probably relevant. I don't know if he was on his deathbed or not, or how sick he was with COVID. Who knows? Perhaps that's relevant, but I was expecting at least something saying like, where we live, where Parliament sits, where we do business, where this nation is governed, is under siege, and to urge calm and to speak to the demonstrators and to talk about a phone call he had with Doug Ford and with Mayor Jim Watson. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what I was saying. Where is he? Like, where's his face? Where's a video on Twitter? Where's something to make some comment? And ultimately he did. He stood in the House of Commons and he made a speech after quite some time. But I think when you ask, where is the prime minister, that's at least what I was saying. But certainly I think there's a fair share of blame to go around. And a big part of it, like AJ's email earlier today, I really liked it, talking about Doug Ford, saying, like, where was he through all of this? And for the most part, he's been relatively invisible.
Well, I think that's the point. The inaction by the provinces forced the hand of the federal government. And, like, am I a Trudeau fan? Absolutely not. Do I think that the Emergencies Act should have been put in place? No. But I think the inaction of the provincial government made the federal government have to do something. It was getting very, very, very dangerous. And so to me, like, where's Trudeau? I feel like he's damned if he does and he's damned if he doesn't.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Jillian says, I truly despair that folks are blaming the PM for this. The folks who hate the guy ask the most of him. It's unreal. I mean, starting with Jason Kenney, right? Jason Kenney's always like, Justin Trudeau's overstepping, get rid of the Emergencies Act. And then it's revealed that Jason Kenney appealed to Ottawa to give him a bunch of heavy equipment and people to operate the heavy equipment to clear up the border. It's like, well, do you want him to step in or do you not? I guess what we're realizing here is that just everybody's a bunch of hypocrites and all of this is politicking, and it's really just a big nightmare for the average person.
And I would say, like, when everyone's like, Canada's divided, Canada is not divided. It's not. I'm sorry. There is a very vocal honky-tonky minority who's, blaring their horns and throwing tantrums. That is a very vocal and dramatic minority. But the majority of Canadians believe in vaccines. The majority of Canadians
are vaccinated.
So I just do not believe this whole Canada's divided thing. And I think it parallels really nicely with what's being talked about with Russia and what we heard about earlier today, the idea that Russia is not a superpower. Stop buying into these garbage narratives. They're total bunk. They are tomfoolery. They are balderdash.
Balderdash. Malarkey, if you want to get a little more political. Yeah! Kimberly says, I gave the Prime Minister slack the first week. The second week, he was MIA, and it was disappointing from a leadership perspective. Joe says Trudeau was set up, period. And Troy says the Prime Minister played it perfectly, in my opinion. He says he knew all the ugliness would be exposed, given enough time and sunlight, and he gave the Conservatives and the convoy enough rope to hang themselves. Maybe that was the strategy. Maybe that wasn't. It seemed like you had something to say on this, Sam.
I have a lot to say on this. I think, okay, I want to highlight a couple points. One of the ones is, like, when we talk about the need for the Emergencies Act or not the need for the Emergencies Act, some of the things that have come out in the reporting is police jurisdiction, right? Coots and Windsor were very different scenarios because they were border blockades, and essentially it was, it boiled down to there was a road with one way in and one way out.
Yeah.
And that was where the logjam was. And there's space on the sides of it for authorities to move in and do that. Ottawa, downtown, is a narrow street, dense, populated area. And did the government get caught flat-footed? Absolutely, they did. They were not prepared for this.
Police did too.
100%. And, one of the things that sort of slipped out a lot is they were talking about, like, when they brought in additional police forces to be able to have jurisdiction to help enforce it in Ottawa, they would have all had to be sworn in as Ottawa police officers. The Emergencies Act removed the need to do that. Any police officer in Canada could now come and serve as part of this effort. So I think that that's one of the things to find out is I think the Emergencies Act is colored by a couple things. One, just this very sort of heavy-handedness to it. But the other thing I'd really like to float here too is, had our prime minister not been named Trudeau and had his dad not used the War Measures Act in the FLQ crisis, would we be having the same conversation?
Yeah, maybe.
I think
not.
he's wearing that legacy a lot in this case.
Yeah. And also, I mean, you talk, and there's so much, like you said, I mean, you're covering just the general main points here. There's also, I mean, what's not lost on anybody is, there was a bunch of trucks in downtown Ottawa. Can you imagine any other protest where hundreds of people are bringing in 20-liter jerry cans of fuel? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
It just doesn't even, and then the Coots thing with all the guns. It's
a playbook we haven't seen before.
Yeah. And certain people, like Hoyles pointed out yesterday, would get away with it, and certain people wouldn't. Sarah, let's focus on something positive. And
can I just interject for 1 minute? The idea
this is going to be a 3-hour show.
Yeah, no, I'll make it really quick. I promise.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
So the idea, this is something that we've never seen before. Well, now people are getting inspiration from what's happening in Canada, and there's actually a convoy happening, planned, kind of coming together in the States. They're calling it the People's Convoy. So we wait to see. They plan to descend on DC in early March.
And and by the way, I see that they're set to arrive March 6th. Pick any other day of the month but the 6th to roll into DC with a bunch of big rigs and look to stir things up, right? I mean, January 6th is it goes down. People talk about Pearl Harbor, 9/11, January 6th, right? So we'll see how that goes. The American women's soccer team, they're getting paid. What's going on here? Bring us up to speed on this. A lot of people have, of course, for a long time advocated for this type of thing, and it looks like it's happening.
So $24 million will be going to the U.S. women's soccer team. So that's to basically bump them up and to get them where they should be.
They had to sue for this, right?
Absolutely, they sure did. Yeah. And it's been ongoing. It's a 6-year legal battle to make this thing happen. And now moving forward, equal pay across the board, men's and women's teams for all of their competitions. So it's about time. I mean, when you look at what the women's soccer team has done, they're doing a heck of a lot better than the men's.
For both nations.
Exactly, Canada and the
U.S. And one of the things, too, is that I see here that their benefits, not their benefits, rather, but the bonuses matching the men's team as well is especially relevant. Like you said, I mean, the women's soccer team is a perennial contender, right? And so these bonuses, that's great news for them. Good stuff, Hoyles. And, of course, we got another good show coming up tomorrow. I'm going to share those details in just a second. Before I do, let me remind you about our partnership with Kubi Energy. So I was talking to this. There's a bit of overlap here. Chris, the CEO at Park Powers, says to me, "Hey, when you're mentioning Kubi Energy, he says make sure you let everybody know that once they get their solar panels installed by Kubi's Tesla certified journeyman or apprentice installers, they should check out Park Powers Solar Club rates. There's different rates for their solar club. I love how this works together. Kubi is providing solar energy solutions to power your life across Western Canada, based out of Alberta and BC." They can work on, they're doing agricultural work. They're doing super clean, beautiful residential work, and then huge commercial and industrial projects as well. Make sure you check out their blog on their website. All kinds of cool stories and information on the Canada Greener Homes Grant and the Clean Energy Improvement Programs. These are all initiatives that can make your solar plan a whole lot more affordable, and it can happen a whole lot more quickly. You can get a free quote today online at kubienergy.ca. And a quick note before we wrap today, at ryanjesperson.com on our website, if you check out the Connect link, that's how you can participate in our Get Real Question of the Week, presented by our research and strategy partners at Y Station. The last 3.5 weeks or so in Canadian life have been something to behold for sure. We were just talking about a couple of those stories, developments that maybe we never saw happening on our side of the border. As protests have ramped up, people are digging in. They say they're not going anywhere. We want your personal take on these moments to review on a future show. You can take part in our question of the week right now at ryanjesperson.com. Now, we mentioned to you tomorrow, I'm looking forward to catching up with Ayla Brooke. His band, Aurel Braun and the Soundmen, this is them. You're hearing right now a new documentary coming out talking about their COVID experience, having just released a new album. Plus, mental health advocate Victoria Maxwell joins me and a roundtable on the Emergencies Act. It's going to be a must-watch show. We'll see you then, friends. Make it a great Wednesday.
They're gonna